Hello, everybody. I'm Brent.
I'm Darko.
And this is Fede with the devnullpodcast.
Happy New Year and welcome to episode 7 of the devnullpodcast. Today we are joined by very special guest Tiernan Mines, co-founder of Hello Lamppost. We'll be discussing civic engagement, civic tech, making cities smarter and more playable. We hope you join us. All of this and more coming up right after this. Tiernan, welcome to the show. We are so very pleased to have you here for a couple of reasons. One, the story of Hello Lamppost, I think, is extremely interesting, and people need to hear about it. And two, this is the first of our interview series, and we're so happy that you decided to join us. Welcome.
Thanks, Brent. Yeah, great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Well, before we get started, how was everybody's New Year?
Different, I think, is the operative word. I think, yeah, quiet, different, but I keep saying it could be a lot worse.
Same. Very quiet, very relaxing. Ate a lot of food, probably too much food. But yeah, had a good time. How about you, Brent?
Yeah, I think different pretty accurately describes it. The usual suspects: ate too much food, probably watched too much Netflix, and played a little too much Xbox. But other than that, I'm pretty happy to be saying goodbye to 2020 and pretty excited with what's to come in 2021. Looks like we're making progress in a bunch of fronts.
Nice. I polished off The Mandalorian over the Christmas period, which I loved.
I keep hearing about what a great show Mandalorian is, but to be honest, and this kind of goes against my better nature as a Star Wars kind of fanatic, I've only seen one episode. No, it's horrible to say. Cobra Kai is on Netflix, season 3. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. And the other thing that I did was I actually got a Nintendo Switch for Christmas, and that occupied a fair few hours.
That is a fantastic Christmas gift. I take mine all over the world with me. Have you played Zelda yet?
Not on Switch. It's on order, though. Yeah. I discovered my inner 10-year-old with Fortnite.
Yeah, there are so many amazing titles for Switch. I'm not even ashamed of my inner 10-year-old anymore. Breath of the Wild, Doom, LA Noire. List goes on.
The other one you can play is Killer Queen. Remember that one, Brent? Like the arcade, the big arcade game where you compete, like it's a 4 versus 4. One person is the queen bee, and then you have to kill each other. There are different ways of winning.
Yeah, Killer Queen. I remember that one. There's an arcade in Uptown, at least used to be an arcade in Uptown. It might still be there, called Up Down. And so 4-person aside, it's actually a pretty fun game. I do recall that one.
Yeah, I think my girlfriend's regretting it, but yeah.
We'll wait until your order of Breath of the Wild shows up and you spend hours and hours just cooking.
Nice.
Legitimately, in that game, you can spend a tremendous amount of time making effectively unlimited recipes. It's too much fun.
Okay.
All right, well, let's get into the show. Before we dig into Hello Lamppost, Tiernan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and explain a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. I guess my background is probably slightly less interesting than the Hello Lamppost history, so I'll start there. But yeah, for me, I've sort of meandered my way, I guess, into where I am now. Complete opposite to, I guess, kind of an MBA approach to business. So I started life out in kind of real estate and construction. That led me into kind of a grad scheme job at a large retail corporate in the UK, which was great, a great kind of learning curve for me. And from there, I was kind of more property focused within that company. And then I actually joined their UK business strategy team. It's kind of a small team working kind of in a silo within the large corporate, reporting to the board, basically working on kind of like secret projects, or secret in inverted commas projects, basically stuff that would get them ahead of the competition, which is a great eye opener for me. I think that's kind of where I realized where my skill sets were and where I kind of enjoyed the more business aspect. And all of the whilst I was at that company, I was still working on this kind of side venture that I'd started with a friend of mine at university, which was kind of like a peer-to-peer marketplace for uni students, where they could just buy and sell items and cut out the postage. And then I got a bit of like seed money for that, some partly grant money, and basically just got to a point where I kind of said, look, I'd rather look back and say, oh well, than what if. So got to a point, jumped ship from the company that I was working for to give it a go full time with this side venture. Did that for a couple of years, and then got asked to join a kind of I guess you'd call it a medium-sized startup. There were about 40 people, and it was an event booking platform, kind of like Airbnb for event space, to launch a new product, new revenue stream. Did that for a couple of years, got that up and running, and then I met my now co-founders, Ben and Sam, just on a friends basis, through a few mutual friend, and they had this kind of thing that was bubbling away in the background called Hello Lamppost. It was this original concept, which I'll tell you a bit more about how that was born. And yeah, they were telling me a bit more about it. They were working on another company at the time, and they didn't really know what to do with this concept, which had been kind of picked up by a couple of cities from their interest, and I kind of saw a bit of potential and different applications for the platform, and was talking to them over, I don't know, course of a year probably, I don't know, and then decided to leave my job then, and we just decided to work casually on it for 6 months, see if we could get some traction, and I guess the rest is history. We then incorporated, and that was March 2018, to hit where we are now. In terms of where the concept for Hello Lamppost, I guess, was born. So Ben and Sam, my co-founders, actually originally ran a design consultancy, revolved around kind of playful technology. And they knew these guys, or these people, at an organization called Watershed in Bristol in the UK. And they ran an annual award called the Playable City Award. So they wanted to create this award, which ran alongside the kind of smart city theme that was evolving, but to create an award which encouraged concepts and ideas, nothing more than that, that were more people focused. So they wanted to encourage ideas that made the city more playful. So essentially more focused on the end user of the city. And Hello Lamppost as a concept, the original concept, ended up winning the award, which funded kind of one project in Bristol, which was a huge success and got a lot of press coverage around the world. But essentially, like the initial concept was really revolved around really two simple observations. One being that we have these city and town environments, and there are objects within these environments, be it buildings or lampposts or bus shelters, that exist, but they're not really used for anything but a singular use. So, a bench you sit on and a lamppost lights the street, but a lot of them have these kind of maintenance codes. So they're all acting as these kind of like hyper-local reference points without knowing it. And the other observation was that we all travel through, pass objects, areas of different towns and cities, and we all have perceptions, opinions, memories, thoughts triggered, but they're never left or shared with anyone. So it was kind of a concept of, if you could combine those two observations and almost create a digital journal mapped across the city, where objects would listen to you, learn from you, share stories with other people passing by, and all kind of like hyper local in these little spaces by an object. So that was kind of how it started out. And as I say, it got a lot of press coverage, and cities were getting in touch to basically ask, can I use this as a product? And it was only ever meant to be this kind of one-off thing in Bristol, which was a great experience. And it's kind of like snowballed a little bit from there, and now various different organizations, cities around the world are using it for a number of different reasons.
I find this concept of interacting digitally with physical objects in a city that you may live, work, or play in to be extremely fascinating. And I often wonder, how well do people know about the history of their surroundings. And I think it's a really incredible way to sort of tease people into beginning with civic engagement in a way that's super friendly and hyper local, because that's how most people spend their lives day to day. So I have to ask, and for those that have ever done this kind of thing, naming something is probably one of the hardest things to do in life, whether it's a band, a company, a child, whatever it may be. I'm extremely intrigued by the name Hello Lamppost. And the reason it's kind of funny to me, when I was growing up, if I was sort of ignoring my dad or he was trying to get my attention in some way, and let's say he was unable to, he would kind of turn to the wall and say something like, "Hello, lamp. Nice to meet you." So to me, like when I hear "Hello, lamppost" and all that, it's like talking to an inanimate object, but here you have given life to it. So with that being said, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear the origin story for the name Hello Lamppost.
It's a question we get asked a lot, actually, and actually most of the time we get asked, is it because of a Simon and Garfunkel lyric? So there's actually a lyric in a Simon and Garfunkel song, but none of the above. Originally we didn't start off with just lampposts. It was really like various different street objects. Lamppost really was chosen because it's ubiquitous in most towns and cities. Post boxes aren't in every location. Bus shelters aren't in every location, but lampposts typically are in pretty much every town and city. So everyone knows it. Everyone knows that object. It's familiar, and hello is just obvious. It is exactly what it says on the tin. It's kind of an obvious name for a ubiquitous object, basically.
If we're to assume that the listeners to this podcast have never played with Hello Lamppost, walk us through sort of the user experience and what the journey might be from that perspective.
Sure, yeah. If you're completely unfamiliar with the platform, imagine you've just stepped off a plane in a new city. As a user, you might be walking down the street or walking through a park or whatever it is, and you'll either see a more obvious signpost on the bus shelter or on the lamppost, which says, "Hey, I'm a talking statue. Chat to me to hear my history." So it'll have that instruction, and it will give a phone number and an instruction, and as well as a QR code. So if you scan the QR code, you can go into SMS, WhatsApp, or Facebook Messenger, or a mobile browser, or you can do it manually by texting that given phone number for that area, just by saying hello and referencing that object. So hello, Nelson's column, or whatever that object is, and then it will respond, as if you're chatting to a friend. So it doesn't pass the Turing test, but it's meant to be a friendly, playful engagement, and I guess the important piece is it's two-way, so it will provide useful, interesting, entertaining information, but it will also ask the user questions. So it's very much like a back and forth chat conversation, and we're talking like it might give its history, and then it might say something like what's your favorite memory of this area, for instance, all the way through to kind of different functionalities, like if you talk to an object again, or you talk to different objects in the same area, then the system will know that and it will become more familiar. So if you chat to an object 5 times in the space of an hour or something like that, it might say, "Hey, you're really chatty. Would you class this as a relationship now?" Right? So it starts to kind of joke around to be friendly with the user.
I can sort of see it now. Imagine, who's this person you're in a relationship with, Brent? No, I swear, it was a statue. It's a statue that I'm talking to, I promise.
Awesome. Is it fair to say that it can be used for, finding your way through a city or a building? Like, can it be used for that purpose as well?
Yeah, I say it's not the primary purpose. It's probably secondary or tertiary. So if you speak to a statue, it might point you in the direction of another point of interest, but it's not designed to be a Google Maps or a navigation system. It's designed for exploration or utility. So talking to a parking meter, being able to pay for parking or find out more information, or talking to a statue if you're a visitor or a tourist, and finding other points of interest.
I think it's worth noting here too that you sort of have walked us through this journey that involves things like QR codes and SMS or text messages, which I think is really, really important from a design perspective. You're not forcing the user to go out and download an app or to create a profile or an account, all which are kind of barriers to getting people to engage with you. So I like the fact that you can kind of make this notion or this comment that like it already works on your phone.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we started on SMS. Like, I think we've got a benefit of, we started out not intending for this to be a product. It was just a one-off project, and consequently it was 100% user focused. How do we make a rich experience for the user, and one of those elements is lowest barrier to entry, and we basically picked what is 98 point something percent of the UK's population have an SMS enabled phone, not necessarily a smartphone, but an SMS enabled phone. So let's start there. And that's kind of one of the pillars is always focusing on a rich user experience, and one of those pillars remains lowest barriers to entry. And yeah, we see ourselves being on multiple platforms going forward, but following wherever people are, rather than making them download an app or making them make an account or whatever.
I'm curious as to your thoughts on how you would categorize and sort of classify the platform that you offer. It seems to me, if you're talking about things like digital breadcrumbs and kind of a trail and enhancing real world physical objects, that this is something that you could argue belongs in the augmented reality space. Is that how you consider or think about yourselves as a company, as a platform?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've steered away from using the phrase augmenting reality because it's been adopted by a particular application. Exactly what you said. So we talk about augmenting reality for us in different ways, adding a digital layer to the city or to the town, giving personalities to inanimate objects. So I guess the short answer is, yeah, we absolutely sit ourselves in the augmenting reality space. But at the moment, we don't use that language just because it's been adopted for a different tool or a different concept. One thing we do always say, which relates, is, for a long time, people have been trying to make smart cities. But we're one of the people just trying to make cities smarter, repurpose what's already there rather than add to it.
I love how you draw the distinction between a smart city and making a city smarter by repurposing things that are already there and maybe bringing some new meaning and a little bit of new personality to the table. And I think there's just a heck of a lot of truth to the statement that unless you go where the users live, especially in government and especially with civic engagement, you just simply aren't going to get any feedback except for those, few folks that are willing to take the extra effort to make their voices heard. And of course, every single city has one, but they don't tend to be the best, representative sample of, how people are living and or thinking. Touching on the augmented reality thing for a second, I know most people, when they hear that term, think immediately about, horribly drawn 3D objects that you can kind of see through the video window on your, new iPhone or your new Android. But for me, like at the macro level, it's this ability to, as you've already articulated, very well, interact with physical things in a digital manner, adding layers. Those layers could be public layers, like the story of the town square and why that particular statue there, or they can be highly personal as well. And I love this idea of being able to kind of leave little footprints, little digital breadcrumbs for, potentially your friends and family and others to interact with. For me, that's all under the augmented reality umbrella. The other notion I want to call out briefly here too is technologies like Hello Lamppost, designed and focused to improve a user's experience with their city or municipality, and sort of through that boost civic engagement. I think are a wave of the future. when most people think about interacting with their city, it's almost always because of some problem they're having. And if you look at, websites, city websites, or, kind of the city public spaces where you can go interact, it's really designed around sort of like complaint and resolution, the two sides of that coin. And funny story from my history, our mutual friend Dave Wursel and I, we worked in a company that focused on civic engagement. One real funny story I have about the United Kingdom is this civic like CRM system that had been implemented was over 95%, hey, when will my bins come and be picked up? Which is hilarious, that's the number one thing that people think about when it comes to their government. But tools like this really do kind of open the door for deeper level of understanding and deeper level of communication with both the government and the citizens that government serve. So with that being said, do you see your platform as a bit of a change agent to kind of change that behavior, to change the relationship in some way between, government entity and citizens?
So one observation which I don't think is a secret to anyone is on both sides, citizen engagement, government engagement, whatever you want to call it, the status quo of that has remained the same for quite a long time. And what I mean by that is the methods and tools and channels have not really evolved that much in a long time. And that's, no fault of the governments or other organizations, because, they're dealing with what they've got. And, they don't have heaps of data scientists or technologists or digital communicators. So it's no fault of their own for them. So consequently, what we still have is many of the primary channels are still, town hall meetings and surveys and methods and channels that the burden remains very much on the citizen to complete, rather than just immersing into someone's life. So we, as well as other like tools out there, are effectively just trying to bring engagement to the street and to the people, rather than seeing, a piece of information and having to find a government website with the relevant information and then fill out a form. That's like 3 or 4 barriers to entry, and we're just lowering that. So yeah, I mean, we often say that we're wanting to allow anyone, anywhere, at any time to shape the places and spaces of the future, and we're just one tool that's making that easier. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could say we're trying to change the status quo of engagement, but I think we're just seeing it as, a well overdue improvement.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Lowering the barrier to entry, removing obstacles that, may stand in the way of your average citizen sort of interacting, whether it's from your example before of like how to use a parking meter better to, perhaps having a conversation with a stop sign about, potential new or dangerous intersections, things of that nature. If it's there and it's right in front of you and it's easy, you're going to do it. But if you have to sort of make a mental note and take the time to go back and figure out how to actually do it, you're just going to have less engagement. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to agree with me on that piece.
Yes, yeah, it's an interesting point because there's 2 strings to that. Like, there is a big problem about I don't know if this phrase translates, but in the UK they talk about the loud voices or the squeaky wheels, right? Those few people that raise the issues because they have the time or the passion to actually go through the processes. But what we're all about is trying to bring more voices to the table, but in a digestible way, because on the flip side, you have the municipalities or the authorities that there's maybe an apprehension about getting so many voices on the table because they have to then try and understand insights from those voices. But us, as well as other tools, are presenting that in a digestible way. So it's almost like you're making democracy or hyper-local democracy easier and decision-making easier because you're hearing from more voices, and actually how we see it is you're shaping communities according to what the masses need and want rather than what the few need and want.
It's interesting. Can you give an example of like ways that people can use it to improve their local communities? Like suppose I'm walking down the street, I'm a resident. How can I use this to improve my environment, my community?
Yeah, I guess it's a variety of ways depending on the object, the location, etc. But so for a user, you might speak to a parking meter and it might ask you if you want to know about parking or pay for parking, right? Likewise, a statue might ask you if you want to know about the history. Otherwise, the objects will also ask you questions about your area, and that might be to do with climate action in the local area. It might be to do about transport in the local area and bettering air quality and well-being. It might also be to do with the city budget. So for example, a city in Canada, Summerside, on Prince Edward Island, for the first 6 months of their deployment, they had content built into the knowledge base which asked people perceptions, opinions around the city's budget. So what they were aiming to do is increase engagement with participatory budgeting. And what ended up happening is because of the platform, their highest ever engagement in the city's budget was achieved. And especially when you look at a sub 30 audience, which is their city's priority because that's who it's going to be for, right, in the future. So yeah, this year's tax budget is directly shaped from partly from Hello Lamppost data from that engagement that happened, and simple questions like, the city has a X amount of tax surplus, what are your priorities for it to be spent on?
Cool.
Simple things like that were kind of included in the knowledge base, all the way through to smaller scale. A part of London, a municipality in London that we work with, they wanted to trial temporary street closures outside of schools. Now that has a multitude of benefits, air quality, safety, etc. outside of schools, but they needed the data to prove it, right? So they did temporary measures of closing a select few, I think it was 5 or 6 streets, deployed objects in and around those streets before, during, and after the temporary closure, to gather people's perceptions, opinions, etc. And then that data went through to kind of strategic decision making, and now they're rolling out permanent street closures throughout the municipality outside schools. So suddenly, school streets become healthier, safer, people's well-being increases because it's fully pedestrianized.
Those are some brilliant examples. Thank you for taking the time to kind of walk us through what you've been up to there. Given that this is a technology-focused show, at least somewhat, we are nerds here. I'd love it if you could kind of walk us through, kind of without the NDA, an overview of your stack. I would assume you're using things like AI and natural language processing and things of that nature. If you could talk a little bit to that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. The main AI tool that we use is natural language processing and understanding. If I think back to what the system was originally, like a super skeleton simple system with no AI involved at all, and as we kind of evolved, we've implemented more and more. But yeah, we think of it in 2 ways: is user and our customer. From a user perspective, it's obviously all about the conversational experience. So everything from kind of recognizing what people are saying in terms of keywords and live sentiment, so that the system can react accordingly. All the way through to recognizing that someone's giving a suggestion, for example, and logging that. All the way through to if someone's says something to do with yes, if they want to pay for parking, then obviously the system can recognize that and field that. There's a lot of kind of tying in automatically to organizations' FAQs, for example. So the system can recognize if someone's asking a question and go and try and find that answer from the organization that we're working with. So from a user perspective, yeah, it's mainly natural language processing and understanding in order to make a richer experience for the user. On the flip side, for the customer, again, it's a lot of NLP and NLU, but more revolved around providing more easily digestible data. So for us, like if we're working with a municipality, there's almost like no point in just giving them a data dump of responses. They need actionable insights, and that's the difference, so that they can make a quick decision. So yeah, all of the responses get analyzed and then fed into data dashboards for our customers. And then what we've been working on recently actually is more ML. So using all of the interactions that we've had through our database and different behaviors to actually feed engines, so that, again, from a user and customer perspective, we can provide more value.
Nice. Just out of curiosity, in how many cities and countries are you currently in?
So we've worked with, over the past couple of years, over 25 different towns and cities. We're currently live in 8, I believe. We are launching in 4 more in the next 4 weeks, I think, or 5 weeks. That covers, I think, 4 or 5 continents. We launched in Sydney, in Australia, for the first time. That's first Australasian deployment just before November, December time, just before Christmas.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, super exciting. Challenging, for doing it from the other side of the world. But no, yeah, really exciting. So we've done it in multiple different languages as well. The platform can support. So for us, it's just a case of, show it to as many people as we can, and show them the value on both citizen and city side.
So I think it makes sense to sort of assume that you work with your clients to, sort of design a system, given all of the assets that they currently have, whether they're physical assets within a city or municipality, as well as their existing digital assets like FAQs and other resources of information. And you sort of help kind of design a solution together. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. So you're absolutely right. Like we spend careful time with them in the implementation process, and training them on, not only how it works for a user, but also how what they get fed in terms of data and insights. It's some people see us as a SaaS platform, but we're really not. We're a serviced software. We are there every step of the way throughout a license period, or forever, to help them with their different needs. But yeah, if you imagine from a system perspective, we have a base layer to the knowledge base within Hello Lamppost, which forms various different personalities for objects, and is the crux of the system. And then we can customize layers on top of that according to the locale and the context of that location, but also the priorities of the city and the citizen.
I have one question from more of a business standpoint. What's your revenue model? How does the company stay alive?
I don't know if that's one question or 2 different questions. I don't know.
Fede with the aggressive questions.
No, it's fine. Yeah, no, it's fine. No, it's cool. So how our revenue model is a license model. So our customers are the municipalities, the construction companies, airport operators, museum operators. So any physical environment that has a need to engage an audience, that is the end user, that is our customer. And essentially we work on a service license model, which mainly scales on the number of activated objects within any given area, because as you can imagine, sometimes we work with a municipality at a city level, but sometimes we work with more local municipalities. So we've structured a license model which can scale large or small. But that's basically how we make money. And it's usually on a 12+ month license. So University of British Columbia in Vancouver has been using us for a couple of years, and they've just signed up for another 3 years. So that's mainly how we make money.
I promise the next question won't be how much does it cost. Let's shift gears for a minute. One of the things that I love about this time of year that I think happens on a number of podcasts, and I'd like to get into sort of an annual habit of doing this as well, is a bold predictions section. Tiernan, you've got a platform that is sort of on the precipice for changing behavior and encouraging engagement and building playable cities and reusing infrastructure that's already there. I would love to hear, what are your bold predictions for the future as it relates to this tech or any other thing?
Sure. Okay. I think this is nothing new to me, but one that I've had for a while, which we're seeing in a kind of multitude of different ways, is environments like urban environments like cities are going to become exponentially more interactive, and that's kind of what playful, tips the hat at, if you like. Whether you're in a retail shop, a library, walking down the street, in your home, our environments are going to become more interactive, and that's going to be a combination between new technology, so smart cities, and adding to existing environments. I think one other prediction, which there's been a couple of indicators to in the past couple of years, is there is, in parallel to that movement, there's going to be increasing questions around privacy as our environments become more interactive, but also the younger generation being more conscious of their data persona, and being more educated around those topics to ask the right questions, which are absolutely the right questions. So I think, two predictions are that probably our cities will become increasingly more interactive, and my hope is that the movement of more conscious data privacy populations, that those interactions will be for the better of society.
It's interesting that you mention, the impact of younger people and their understanding of data and privacy related to data on the internet. I tend to agree. As a father of two, used to be young children, I used to worry all the time that their data was being used in ways that they don't understand. When in reality, in talking to them and watching the way they behave online, it does appear that they actually understand that a heck of a lot better than I think than we give them credit for. Perhaps it's something about being born and raised in a digital age.
Yeah, and I guess a lot more like a lot more societally driven as well. I'm seeing a lot more young people not being afraid to sort of to stand up on the stage and fight for what's right, or not, stand up for what's right. And data privacy is I think one of those movements.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, Fede, your turn. Give us a big, bold prediction.
20 years from now, I can see young kids touching a window and expecting the window to be interactive. So I agree with your I agree with your statement.
Couldn't agree more.
Man, I think some of that might be happening already. I see really young kids walking up and touching a TV screen like it's their tablet, because it's everything they've ever known. So that makes a ton of sense to me. We talked about this in a previous show, but imagine walking down the street and that digital window that you can touch and interact with is now piping advertisements directly at you. So who knows where this tech might go?
That's going to get awful. You walking down the streets like bombarded by ads, like in real life.
Tiernan, before we wrap things up here, in your opinion, who in the world is doing this well, from a digital city, smart city, making cities smarter, citizen engagement perspective? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, there are some that are doing fantastic work when it comes to using technology for the better of society, that we're not currently deployed in. London's one. They appointed a chief digital officer a couple of years ago for that exact reason. San Francisco is another one. Vancouver's another one. Sydney is another one, and then there's some smaller ones. Malmo in Sweden, the Netherlands are doing some fantastic stuff. So there are more and more out there, and I think it's a bit of a snowball. It takes a few to start the ball rolling. But you definitely see those that embrace new innovations in technology more than others, and then the others will just follow later on.
Tiernan, what an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on the DevNull podcast, and thank you for telling us more about all the interesting things that you have going on at Hello Lamppost. Why don't you tell everybody where we can find you on the internet?
So our website's hlp.city, so that's for hellolamppost.city. And if anyone wants to catch me on Twitter, it's at Tiernan Mines. Thanks very much for having me, guys. It's been awesome. Happy New Year.
The DevNull podcast is a bi-weekly science and technology podcast brought to you by Darko Klincharski, Brent Kastner, and Fede Zagarzazu.
Hey, and if you guys have any feedback for our show, do let us know. You can find our contact details in the show notes.
Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, have a great day.